love being able to share with you different little things to think about daily. And this is one of the things that I read yesterday and today that I would like to share with you. Did you know that we should observe, but not necessarily absorb? Now, when I'm talking about observing, that means keeping an eye on things, but not taking things into oneself and understanding that observation is actually a wonderful tool to be able to avoid mistakes and pitfalls of others. You know, Paul wrote this. He said, of course, these things were written for our lessons. You see, the stories of the Bible and the pitfalls that many of the characters of the Bible felt and saw was basically things that we do not have to follow suit in when it comes to life. Second thing that I thought was love, but don't depend. You know, that is so important. And that is that many people today, they depend on others and expect others to come and rescue them. But that isn't necessarily a good thing. It can be because of the fact that, you know, when you are able to depend on someone, it's great. But understand this, that even sometimes people that you depend on can actually, of course, become when they don't do that, then of course it becomes a problem. So love, but don't depend. That means that you and I are to love those that come into our lives, but we don't have to necessarily depend on them and lean on them, because after a while it becomes a real burden. Also, want, but don't need. You see, the Bible says that God will give us the desires of our heart. But you see, when you start needing something, and that's what envy and that's what, you know, our world is all about. They say, you deserve this. I mean, this is what you deserve. You need that vacation. I mean, maybe you don't need the vacation or you can't afford the vacation. You need that latest phone, and yet your phone is perfectly fine. So, you know, want can be a real problem. Need, of course, is something that the Lord promises that He will always supply. Feel, but don't dwell. Now, there's a real truth in itself. You see, you and I, we can feel for others. We can, you know, help others, but don't dwell on something, especially something like an offense. Every one of us has the possibility of being hurt. And the problem is when we get hurt, often what we will do is we will dwell on that thing. We will think that thing. We will, you know, stay on that thing. If we're offended, we could nurse it, we could rehearse it, and then what happens is it becomes a curse or a stronghold in our lives. And so that's one reason why we shouldn't dwell on something. That's why we should disperse this thing, and that's why we should let it go. So when it comes to offenses and hurts, let them go. Also, as well, give, but don't expect. I was actually listening to a video by Kevin Leary. Now, Kevin Leary, of course, is a very wealthy man. And the interviewer asked him, what do you do when someone from your family or a friend comes and asks you for money to start off a business? He said, in the early days, he said, I would give them money and expect some sort of repayment. But he said, as time progressed, he says, I began to realize that this issue of money would put a wall between me and my friend. So he has a rule of thumb now. He says if someone comes to him and asks for money to start a business or, you know, some enterprise, he says the simple rule is this. He says, I will give them the money. He says, but I will tell them that they cannot come back to me again and ask for more money. This is a one time gift. He says, I'm giving it to them. not expecting to get it back. But he says, my rule of thumb is if I spot you a large amount of money, he says, he says, I don't want you to come back and ask for it any more money. It's a one-time gift. Another thing that I've observed is you speak, but you don't hurt. And that's really what's very important. That's why David said, he said, put a watchman on my mouth. I would not sin against you. David understood that our words can hurt. He understood that the tongue can be very, very painful. So when you are speaking to people, always think about the content of what you're saying, who you are saying it to, and in the manner in which you are speaking. You see, our words can either lift someone up or tear someone down. And that is a very important thing to remember. So today, this is absolutely important things that make sense. So let's look at them again. Observe, but don't absorb. Love, but don't depend. Want, but don't need. Feel, but don't dwell. Give, but don't expect. And speak, but don't hurt. These are things that you and I should be well aware of. These are things that you and I should be, of course, observing in our lives and making them a part of our lives. Let me just give them to you one more time so that you have them inside your heart. Again, observe, but don't absorb. That means watch what's going on around you, but don't sit there and take it all in and as if it has something to do with you. Love, but don't depend. That simply means that when you act in love, of course, you can help others, but don't depend on them to reciprocate that love to make you feel better. Love, but don't depend. Want, but don't need. There are things that we want, but don't turn it into a need. And because when you turn it into a need, it becomes another thing like greed or envy. Feel, but don't dwell. When I'm talking about feel, but don't dwell, what I'm talking about here is about the fact that if we all have deep emotions. But one of the things that we have to understand is that people can hurt or offend us. And when we're offended, it's okay to be hurt, but not to stay hurt. Because when you stay hurt, it becomes a wall between you and that person. And that's why you need to walk in forgiveness and allow forgiveness to be a part of your life. Don't dwell on it, okay? Let it go. Just like the song says in Frozen. Give, but don't expect. Again, I use Kevin O'Leary as an example about the fact that he says when people come to him to borrow money, he tells them it's a one-time gift. When you give something to someone, don't expect it back, okay? Especially with money, because what will happen, it will become a wall between you and them. And speak, but don't hurt. That means we're called to speak the truth, but we speak it in love. Think about what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and also as well the content of what you're saying. This can save you so much trouble in life. So that's my simple exhortation. Let me give it to you one more. Observe, but don't absorb. Love, but don't depend. Want, but don't need. Feel, but don't dwell. Give, but don't expect. And speak, but don't hurt. I've given to you 3 times. The reason I've given it to you 3 times is I want you to get the essence of the message. You see, when you do this, suddenly a lot of things begin to make sense. So that's my thoughts for you today. My name is Robert Dean Steele. This has been YouTube Live. And again, I want to thank you for watching the video. And also as well, if you like what you're seeing, press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I want to thank all the people who have been subscribing to my YouTube channel. Of course, I have many different videos on many different things. And Today, of course, I did some YouTube shorts, and I'm going to be uploading them very shortly. And they are, of course, usually short little videos on one subject. And they're usually less than 1 minute long. So check them out as well. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Have yourself a great and godly day.